Okay, we're going live. Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to those of you that have joined us on this Together Apart webinar. This evening focusing on winter sports, particularly at school, but a broader discussion around issues at sport, school and national level. We really have a stellar panel, very experienced in schoolboy and schoolgirl coaching, but extending through national ranks as well. And I'll introduce them in a short while. Just before we get going, some thank yous are in order. Events like this don't happen by themselves, so I'd really like to thank those of you who've put this together, particularly Peter Henning and Irene Basson from the St John's IT department. Thank you very much for your communication over the last week. To the sports department, Alan Leon Cachet, Adrian Norris in particular, to the hockey, rugby and squash departments who've supported this venture. To Jackie Deeks from marketing for all the communication on social media. Really appreciate it. And for the graphics, you've done a great job as always, Jackie. And then, of course, to the headmaster, Stuart West, for his support of this webinar and lots of other projects that have gone on through the lockdown period. A very difficult period for schools, and particularly in the last few days, we've seen how the target has moved very, very quickly, and schools have had to be very agile. So just know, Mr. West, that you have our support and that the St John's community and that everybody around the country really is supportive of the great work that educators, teachers and sports coaches are doing under these difficult circumstances. Although this webinar is really aimed at the St John's community, I know there are a number of people from around the country who have tuned in, and we welcome you all. Many of you who are really involved in school sport and coaching, and we welcome your input from all the viewers this evening. Please send your questions through on the live chat on YouTube. Go to the live chat, type in your questions, they'll come to me, and we will throw them to the panelists. As I said, we have an excellent panel here this evening who are well qualified to brief us on school sport and the progression of schoolboys and schoolgirls through their careers and give us their expert opinion. So I'd like to introduce them. Firstly, Garreth Ewing, St John's College first team hockey coach, director of hockey, and someone, as I look before me here, who has an absolutely stellar CV, extending right through from junior school coaching, senior school coaching, college coaching in the USA, and then various age group levels right through to one of his current positions with the South African national hockey squad. So very, very well qualified to tell us about hockey coaching through the age groups. Welcome to you, Garrett, this evening.
Thanks very much, Josh. Great to be here.
Then we've got Katleho Lynch, newly appointed Director of Rugby at St John's College. Again, for a young man, I look at his career extending back from 2009, coaching in junior schools, and again, right across the country, various age groups into the provincial sides and national age group representative sides. Katleho, welcome to this evening's webinar. We look forward to your input on the state of rugby in schools, coaching, and your input from your experience at national age group coaching level. So welcome to you.
Thanks, John. Much appreciated.
And then not to forget a third winter sport, very important, one of the great sports that many boys and girls carry on through their careers, and that is squash. We welcome Ross Pretorius, again, highly qualified, has coached many top young squash players across the country, many of whom have achieved national rankings, and many of whom are now playing squash at a very high level across the world. So, Ross, we welcome you to give your insights into an individual sport, more sort of individual sport, which will contrast nicely with the team sports of hockey and rugby. So let's get going. As I say, please bring your questions in, type them into the YouTube chat, live chat, and we will bring them up on our screen so I can read them. I want to go straight to sport at school. It's something we're missing at the moment. It's something that boys and girls really want to get back to. Why is that? Why is sport such an important part of what our schools offer? We've done a lot of learning online. Kids seem to have coped, but one of the things they're really missing is the sport. Katleho, maybe let's start with you. What is it that you're missing, that the boys are missing, that really gives you those life experiences and lessons that will never be learnt anywhere else?
Yeah, John, for me, it's just about the connections that you make off the field. Just switching off from the classroom and looking down on your books and studying and whatever. For me, that really is something that I'm missing, and I'm sure the boys are also missing that. Just that communication and the connection that we make on the field, what we do at training, and how we build it up to game day. And obviously, if those things are done right, getting the feeling of winning on that Saturday and enjoying the work that you've put through throughout the week. That's the one thing that I'm missing massive amounts.
What are the lessons you try and instill in the boys, not only just on the playing field, but in the build-up, in the gym, in the preparation? What does rugby teach the boys? It's a sport that comes into a lot of criticism for its physicality, for its injury rate. Some parents don't like the game. We see.
All right. So in terms of that, it's just a matter of bringing life skills into it, John. So in life and in the classroom and off the field, there's always things that we want, but we might not get them. And sometimes we have to be patient to receive those rewards. And it's also the same in rugby. And there is certain things that you work for, maybe as an individual or perhaps as a collective team. And you do achieve small goals, but you don't always achieve the ultimate goals. But there's also values like perseverance that rugby can teach you. Keep on fighting, keep on improving. Academic staff will tell you keep on improving your marks and keep working harder. It's the same on the rugby field as well. So it's a matter of just improving and using that as a life skill to adapt and be a holistic individual.
Yeah, Katleho, I agree with you there. I also think there's more than one classroom, in the school environment, and the sports field is probably one of the biggest and most important, just in terms of the participation, the self-management, the decision-making that has to take place. So, the discipline, just being able to be a little bit more perhaps responsible for what you need to do in a day. So I'm missing that quite a lot. I think also just that basic interaction, a little bit of give and take, a little bit of banter, a little bit of conflict. That's really important, and it's part of the whole education process. So there's something lacking when that isn't there. Part also from the fact of sitting on my ass for the last 8 weeks. I'm quite keen to get out and do some work. So yeah, I don't know what you think, Ross. It's you guys are indoors, much more different in terms of numbers and that kind of thing. Must be quite interesting for you as well.
Yeah, I know it is. It is quite interesting. I also just think that there's a difference in terms of the feeling, right? You go to school and you study and stuff. When you're on the sports field and you're training and you're sweating, there's like a feeling that you build with your comrades and your teammates. And I think that's what a lot of guys miss. It's that like fun aspect. I'm not saying that school isn't fun. I just mean that the sport brings that different dynamic. I think that's something that also sort of contributes towards your mental health, like kind of dealing with guys in a different way. Like you said, conflict and banter, that all stimulates you in a different way. So I'm very excited to get back with the squads for sure.
Guys, sorry, I seem to have frozen out there for a minute, but I think we're back. Can you all hear me?
Got you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Loud and clear.
I often have parents bringing kids to me with whatever injury in my role as a sports doctor, and they turn the conversation in the direction of sport as a career. Which I'm always nervous to address, because I've seen over my 25 years of experience in this game that it can be quite a tenuous route to undertake a career in sport. And yet, if someone's going to commit to your team, to you as a coach, you really want them to give everything. And we know that sport in certain areas does provide a viable living, for certain people. And yet, I think you'll appreciate it. It is something of a gamble. How do you balance the education side with the commitment needed to become a professional sports person? What's the advice that you give to kids who really want to achieve in sport at the highest level? Garreth, you got any ideas on that?
Yeah, John, the advice I give is hedge your bets. My sport doesn't offer much by way of a full-time professional playing career. There's a very small handful of guys who might make it in the Netherlands or Belgium. But for me, it's more about what doors it opens for you. So it's taking care of your educational side of things, because actually your best opportunity in a hockey sense is to be playing hockey at university. And that's where you're going to get your most benefit, because that's going to lead into your career later on. You can go down the path that I'm on as a coach, but it's long and hard. It's difficult. It's 27 years worth of experience at this point, and I'm not where I want to be yet. So for me, it's always just a case of striking that balance. If you can commit fully on the field, but you're also committing fully to your studies and you're committing fully to your networking, then you're going to get the most out of it. Then you're going to be professional. It's not just about the sport. It's actually about your lifestyle.
Ross, any ideas in terms of squash? What opportunities are there for young squash players out there?
I think kind of what Garrett said summed it up well, in terms of if you work hard during high school and you perhaps make the South African team or the junior pro tiers, you will go overseas and you will represent your country in places where there are going to be scouts for perhaps international colleges and things like that. And that's actually where our opportunity lies. Like there is opportunity within South Africa, but with all the junior South African players that I've worked with, kind of the goal and the picture is, guys, work as hard as you can, go on tour, be likable, have friends, do all that stuff, but go out, because that's where the opportunity will come and find you. And you will go overseas, and that's where you'll kind of make something for yourself. I think obviously here within South Africa, you can go and become a coach and do all those sorts of things like I've done. But a lot of youngsters want to travel, and it's also a great opportunity to go and travel and to experience different cultures and things like that. And you get to do it through a sport that you love. I think there's a lot out there.
Katleho, South Africa winning the World Cup wouldn't have done much to dissuade youngsters from trying to follow that dream. I mean, if anything, it made it more tangible that that's what they want to achieve. What are the sort?
Yeah, John, I think from a rugby perspective, obviously with us winning the World Cup, was the Boks winning the World Cup, that did create a lot of hope for especially young people, and obviously just seeing a person like Sia lift up that trophies, obviously, I think it reunited the whole nation. But in terms of opportunities in rugby in South Africa, there are opportunities, but the problem is that only so many boys can get a professional contract. And if you can compare, let's say 15 to 20 years ago, players were focusing more on their professional sport and neglecting the academics, and then only to find out after they've retired that, yes, I'm actually missing out on something. I don't have, academic qualification behind my name. And I think that's sort of like turned around now, where players are actually trying to do or get the balance of both academic and obviously pursue a professional career, which I think is probably the best possible way for now. Just to get that balance right, because professional sport is not a lifetime thing as well. All right, so it's just a matter of just investing in yourself while you're playing pro sports, so that you've got something to work on and fall back on afterwards.
So I think the message we're sending out is that sport is a parallel career, that you take your studies with you as long as you can, and you build up a career that might carry on further should sport not work out, should you get injured, should your career come to an end. you've got something that you can take with you. And I think there's a lot of examples, tragic examples of sportsmen and women that haven't done that, unfortunately. We've got some questions coming through here. Sandile Sebeko says, does the school incorporate a long-term athletic development plan into the sports programs and curriculum, specifically in relation to injury prevention and performance enhancement? I think that's very important in terms of prolonging your careers and looking further in terms of your development. What sort of aspects does St. John's build into the program and other schools for that matter? Anyone like to comment?
Yeah, John, we do pay attention to it, and for us at St. John's, it's quite a holistic thing. We want to make sure that we're catering to every athlete. We're catering to the recreational player who might play D team or E team his whole way through, but takes great pleasure in the sport. We want to make sure he has a safe day. And then we also, you can look at the caliber of coaches on this chat, and never mind some of the summer sport coaches. We've got some very high level coaches to cater towards the more elite level athletes in the school. So we pay attention to that, and there's a lot of talk, a lot of work around safety, making sure kids have got the right equipment, making sure that conditioning programs are in place, and that there's supervision around that. It's not just throwing kids out into the gym. And then, of course, the medical side, the physios, the bios, it's all very much working together to make sure that people are looked after in the right way. You know yourself in terms of our return to play and making sure that nobody can get back on the field until they've been signed off. And we take that stuff very seriously because the safety of the kids is actually more important. And if they're not enjoying sport because they're afraid of getting injured, then we're going to lose them. So we make sure we get that balance right.
Yeah, it's amazing what support structures the kids have around them now in terms of paramedical support and the physios and biokineticists, doctors, etc., which I think all helps. Let's get back to some of these ambitious sportsmen and look at the characteristics that you identify as coaches that say that kid has got it. They're going to go somewhere in this sport. What are the key characteristics, Katleho, that you think you've spotted in rugby players that you know that this guy is going to break through the ranks and make it at the different levels?
Yeah, John, for me, it's just to start off with a one word: sacrifice. So obviously they sacrifice whatever challenges that they have, whatever drawbacks that they may have in terms of, obviously they know that they're good and they know that they can perform on the field. But what's going to take them to the next level is obviously their sacrifice. What do they sacrifice to get to a training session when they can't get to a training session? Just a lack of like a player that doesn't make excuses. Obviously someone that's just works so damn hard to get the balance right between what he has as part of his talent, and then combining it with all the other values that come with it, with the hard work and what I've just mentioned as well. So I think for me, it's obviously the talent, the sacrifice, what you sacrifice behind that to help you get ahead, and then the hard work ethic and hard work. There's just no substitute for that. And those are the players for me that you can always spot, and from miles away you can just see by the attitude as well.
Great.
I actually find that the athletes that kind of rise to the top are ones who've got quite good self-management skills. They find the time in the day to get their classwork done. They find the time in the day to go to gym and to do extra sessions. And by no means all, but a lot of them kind of are kind of above average in most respects of the things that they do. And that's because they can give a level of focus to things. And for me, that's a key characteristic of kids who are going to kind of go all the way.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, that being a top sportsman or woman doesn't exclude you from performing well in other areas. And in fact, it might even assist things in terms of your time management. Ross, in terms of an individual sport, what are those characteristics that you identify?
So I think I've narrowed it down to kind of three main things that I would see. And the first one is like normally I don't know what you want to call that. A well-performing student is confident in what they do. They're aware of their skills and they're confident. Like when they get on court and they're playing, they know what they're capable of. Before matches, they're going to tell me, okay, cool, I'm going to do this, this, and that. And you can just see there's a confidence about them. When you look at them in the eye, they're just very confident about their skill. Number two is that they're not afraid to try new things. So if I say, hey guys, we're going to try to do, for example, a top spin boast, they're not overwhelmed. They're the first guys to jump at it and say, "What? No, try that." You know, because they understand that new things and being exposed to new things is actually where the progress comes from, and that's how they're going to get better. And the third thing is they're always giving 100% of what they've got 100% of the time. So if I can say, if you're doing 1,000 push-ups, those guys are going to be like, "Great, we're going to do it," and they're going to do it with a smile on their face. They're not making excuses and trying to cut corners. They're just doing it. I think for me, it's also, you'll note everything I've said is pretty much mental. There's very little down to physicality. It's your mindset behind your approach toward it. And the more that these guys are able to just keep their mind focused and controlled, that's when the results actually come, because they'll put in the hard work. It's not a question about it, but getting over that mental, or getting into that mental state of doing it. And I think that's what's really important.
I'd like to turn to the topic that is very close to my heart, and that is mentorship, and talking a little bit about your roles as mentors to boys and girls, and perhaps start off with a question as to who were your mentors. Garreth, like to comment on people who left an impression on your coaching career?
I think the first one I consider my mentors in this environment are my parents, because they kind of allowed me to follow a dream and go down a pathway that was not necessarily that secure in terms of employment, etc., etc. I had to kind of make my own way, and they gave me the time for that. In terms of the actual coaching side of things, Alan Leon Cachet, and I'm not just sucking up to my boss, has had a big inspiration for me, for the way his calmness and his integrity and the way he holds himself is something I've learned a great deal from, because I was quite emotional in my younger days. Hockey coaching wise, Garth Nielsen, some of you may know him, my very first high school coach. He was back in Fourway. He was at Fourways now, and he kind of got me excited about hockey. Phil Wallace, very good hockey player, who kind of first made me think I could do this seriously. And then Neville Rothman, who's at Uffies, who's just a really good man and a colleague, who's helped me see a lot more of the educational aspects of hockey coaching. I think it's always a cumulative thing. Every single person you work with leaves something with you. Could be positive, could be negative, and it helps you grow into the package that you are.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and I think the way you describe it as a journey in which you interact with many different people who leave impressions on you is a fantastic one. Ross, anyone in particular, or any significant people who you've looked up to as a coach?
So when I first started off playing squash, there was a guy by the name of Calvin Edwards, who was like a provincial player. He kind of taught me the techniques and things. And I was introduced to the Protea men's coach, whose name is Richard Castle, and he blew my mind. I was like, wow, this guy's incredible. Like, he just brought a whole different aspect to the game that I didn't even think about. And it was just so cool because we got along. So, I mean, phone calls and WhatsApps and things. It's been very inspirational just learning from him in terms of a sporting squash perspective. I've got mentors in other areas of my life, which I do believe are really important, but sports specifically, I think those two guys were the main ones.
Katleho, you've worked with so many good coaches you've listed on your CV here. Which of those have left their impression on you?
Yeah, John, for me, the first person that's made a massive impact on my coaching career is a guy by the name of Andre Trudeau. He's just so giving, so selfless. The one thing that I really, really appreciate about him is that he never lies to me, so he doesn't tell me what I want to hear. He tells me what I need to hear. And that's so important, for myself as a young coach to know exactly, if I'm taking the right road, if I'm taking the wrong road. So in terms of that, technically, he's also helped me to become the person that I am. But I think he's also got the balance right of assisting me to get the balance right between managing players, getting to know guys one-on-one and getting to find out what makes them tick and all that stuff. And then the second guy is a guy by the name of Bafana Ntleko. He coached me for a short while at UJ. I think it was in 2010. And the one thing that I like about him and what he's taught me is just to be simple as possible and to have clarity. and what's also great about him is that he's just so authentic. He's just a genuine human being that's just got your best interest at heart. And for me, those are the two people that have made a massive impact on my coaching career.
And just while you're talking, how seriously do you take your role as a mentor? I mean, I think a lot of kids, playing under you as a first team player, it's going to be the pinnacle of their careers. They're not going to take their rugby further. How important is what you say to those boys in terms of lasting impressions?
Yeah, John, for me, it's very important. For me, it's important that I only don't focus on what they can achieve on the field. It's not just about going through a week of training and just getting a result and then my job is done. For me, it's just about that one-on-one relationship, that contact time, getting to know what makes you tick, getting to know what do you enjoy outside of rugby, all the things that you wouldn't get to know that you'd be involved with, as a coach. So it's just getting to know them more off the field, and that's a good balance for me. And most of my players all know that I always say to them, good things happen to good people. It's just something that sticks for me and something that I can pass on to them that they'll never forget. And that's what's close to my heart.
Quite interesting. You talk about knowing the boy and girl off the field. I mean, one of the things that has changed a lot in the school sports model is the role of the sports coach as a professional. So the sports coaching has been professionalized, semi-professionalized. It's no longer the history master who closes up the classroom at 2:00, puts on his boots and socks and goes down and coaches the team. I mean, do you think that's had an impact negatively on schoolboy rugby in terms of actually understanding the boy in the classroom and then understanding him on the field? Or do you feel that it's just a question of the professional coach having to work that much harder to use time to get to know the boy or girl off the field?
Yeah, John, for me, that's pretty simple. At the end of the day, we don't work with robots, so we are working with human beings, and human beings want conversation and they want connection. And coaches have to get that balance right if you want players to also trust you. And that's the way I feel about it. I'm very, very passionate about that. You have to make sure that you invest in time in your players off the field as well as what you're trying to do in terms of helping them to become better technically. It's just about developing the whole human being as a whole. That's
a great response. I mean, I see the questions, lots of questions coming through here, and I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row that are all asking, when are we getting back? Are we playing winter sport? What's happening? And I think, in all honesty, to the people that have asked these questions, we really don't know. And I think what we are seeing is sporting staff, just like the academic staff, doing their best to keep boys and girls enthusiastic about sport and keep them fit. And I think maybe quickly some ideas of how that's been done. And Garreth, maybe you can touch on the national setup and your challenges in terms of keeping players active and enthusiastic who are not just in one area, but around the world. How are you doing it with your schoolboys? How are you doing it with your national players?
It's interesting because obviously we live our lives online now. So I've actually on the hockey side, on the national setup, we've stepped back from hockey. And we're using this opportunity to build on our cultural aspects, spend a lot of time sharing, spend a lot of time gathering personal histories, moving forward in an area that we don't often spend time in when we face to face because we're under so much pressure to get hockey under our belts. So it's actually in a way been quite beneficial, with people so far away from each other, and some guys are starting to exercise again and get out onto the Astro. If you live in Europe, obviously they're in a different phase with their infection rate. That's been difficult, but the sharing online has been actually fantastic. From a school point of view, I think we've got to strike a real balancing act between keeping the boys excited and motivated and not overloading them. They've got so much screen time already. They're working so hard in the classroom that we need to be careful. So we've made stuff available. The exercise programs are available. The psychological support is available. For me, it's been the odd check-in, the odd little fun activity. We did a planking challenge versus rugby. 2 weeks ago where we got absolutely cleaned up. No surprise there at all. But just trying to keep it light, not trying to make the anxiety any more than it already is.
That's great. Ross, how are you keeping your squash players fit? Hopefully, as a sort of non-contact sport, they might get back a little bit sooner than some of the other sports. How are you keeping them enthusiastic and fit?
So the mental, like what you're saying now about the enthusiasm is like, that's been the toughest part, because we've had players who've been working so hard towards certain tours and, you know, tournaments, and it almost just feels like everything was just pulled from under their feet. And so first protocol for me is just kind of talking with those guys and just sort of affirming the fact that, hey, you'll have another time. These things are happening. Your feelings are real, you know, and just going through that whole side of it. But then as St. John's, we've kind of set up online sessions where basically I would then facilitate, say, a 45-minute session with our different squads. And that's fun because we get to banter and we get to talk a bit, catch up, and then we're also doing something productive. And it's very much, you can do it at home, in your garage or in your bedroom, but it's still really beneficial. And it is tailored towards squash. We're focusing on the certain muscle groups and things like that. And so far, response has been that it's worked super well. Yeah, I think it's just really promising for the future because it's a new way that we can train. Guys don't always have to be present on school and on campus.
Katleho, I mean, one thing we're all missing is that smell of the boerewors rolls on the side of the field on a Saturday, the war cries, etc. How are you keeping the boys motivated? How are you keeping them fit in a season which may well be a lost one for boys hoping to pull on that blue jersey and represent the college?
Yeah, John, there is a program that SA Rugby actually sent out to all the provinces, and what I've done is I've just sent out those training skills and those training drills to all the players, and there's always opportunity there for them to progress their drills if they feel that they're getting bored and it's too repetitive. So they've been doing a whole lot of that. What's also been nice is that they've also been doing a lot of analysis. So we post a clip at the start of the week, and then we also post a clip towards the end of the week, and then in between we nominate 4 players, 2 players to have a look at the attack from the one side, and then 2 players to have a look at the defense from the other side. And some of the responses and the analysis that we've gotten back is just absolutely unbelievable. And actually, for me, as a coach, I've actually learned something in terms of trusting our players. You actually need to trust them more and give them opportunity to lead, and they'll actually surprise us. You know, so they've been doing a whole lot of that, and then obviously the one-on-one check-in with a few boys has also been quite consistent. Yeah, and I think, like Garrett said, he summed it up. We just need to get the right balance. So we also, from our side, try not to give them too much info and trying to overwhelm them. You know, they still have to focus on academics and switch off. You know, so we also just trying to get that balance right.
I mean, do you think losing a period like this in terms of development, I've got a question here from Clinton van der Berg, is going to cost these kids in the long term? Or I think, as you've alluded to, they might actually have picked up other skills during this period and they can carry them with them and make it up. I mean, would you say that's probably the case, and that they'll probably be able to make up the sort of lost time in terms of losing a few months?
Yeah, maybe physically they might have lost out on a good year of rugby, but I think that's going to be for everyone. You know, that's for everyone in South Africa. But just in terms of what they've done to grow mentally and to study the game and all that stuff, that's where they might actually cancel the imbalance. You know?
Yeah. Can I turn to the role of you as sports coaches, the role of our schools in feeding into elite sporting structures? You've all worked with players who've gone on to achieve higher things. Some of you are working with those elite players at different levels of the game now. How do you balance as a school your role in terms of all-round education, St. John's, we call it body, mind, and character, actually feeding into an elite system, which as a hockey coach, a rugby coach, a squash development coach, you're trying to support? How do you balance those? Garreth, you've got many years experience in this.
Yeah, it's a tough question, because the pathway can go one of two ways for a young hockey player. You're either going to go and become a club player, which I think is underrated, and I think many more young schoolboys and schoolgirls should go and play club hockey when they leave school. And the other one is that you go to university and you follow that kind of bursary pathway. We're talking about less than 1%. You might go straight into playing in an overseas club or something like that. So it's kind of just, and I think for me, the body, mind, and character is the most important, because it gets tough when you finish school. You're not walking 5 minutes down to the Astro to go and have your practice and hang out with your mates. Now you've got to finish varsity, or you've got to finish work, and you've got to get there in the traffic, and you've got to do it at 10 o'clock at night when it's freezing cold, and it's not much fun. So it's to kind of help build that resilience and build that desire to keep doing it through when it stops being fun and stops being, or not fun, but it stops being easy. And for me, that's quite important. And to help gear, kind of make sure that the boys who should be carrying on after school, and I don't mean that in an elitist way, but we have the athletes who can achieve, to make sure that they still want to, and they want to go in the right direction, and to help push them in the right direction, whether that's going to the right university or not going to university, but going to the right club. To me, that stuff's what we need to get right at school.
Ross, any ideas on that?
I think what Gareth said is very valid. The main role that we can play, I suppose, is shaping the character and helping our students to actually understand what is required to go and perform at that level. Because the reality is we are not dealing with professionals yet. But once they leave school, that is when they start breaking into that tier of they can now become professional. And so we can't treat them as professionals right now, but we can show them a glimpse into what that might be. And one of the main ways that I like to do it is we sit down, we do goal setting, and just show them, guys, these are your goals. The clearer they are, the better the chance that you're going to achieve them. And then these are the steps you need to take in order to get to your goals. Because if they can understand and they can grasp that my hard work will pay off and that they're working towards something, when they leave school, they'll have that internal structure in them that will allow them to go and perform things and achieve things that they haven't before. And so I think that needs to be our role. We've just got to shape and draw a picture for them and just help them to understand what is required at that level.
If I could interrupt,
can I ask you a little bit about a question that's come through about students who've got a precocious talent, but perhaps also a precocious attitude. And they come with that confidence that Ross spoke about, but maybe it's borderline arrogance. How do you deal with that in a 16, 17-year-old? Do you try and put a lid on it? Do you try and manage it somehow and just let the talent blossom? Because I think it can be disruptive to an environment as well.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question there from Mr. West. Yeah, and a very difficult one. But just in terms of what we do as coaches, I don't think you should out-coach that. I do think that you should do your best to manage it. So for me, and from my short experience in coaching, for me, it's just a matter of getting that individual to also understand that this is not about you within this team environment. Obviously you're allowed to express yourself as an individual. You're allowed to play to the best of your ability, but your behavior and what you do on the field and off the field is still, it's still important to what we're trying to achieve as a team. So I think for me, if you can manage it as a coach, but still give that individual, the freedom to express their talents and manage their attitude, you'll still be able to manage him and the team environment.
Okay, Garreth, you must have had numerous examples in your career. I mean, how do you manage that situation?
I think that we all know the cliche about you have to be good before you can be arrogant, before you can be brilliant. So generally an arrogant player is going to have some kind of talent behind him. but there's a line that you reach where one player does not outweigh the needs of the 18. And I think always in our school environment, we must remember that boys are very much growing up and finding their feet emotionally and socially. So we've always got to give them the benefit of the doubt and help them to grow and help them to learn from their process. But as you get higher up the ladder, eventually it becomes kind of a depreciation in terms of the investment that you put into that player. So it becomes a difficult one. For some people, it might be 10 years before they eventually too much. But generally, people don't last too long at the very highest level if they're not going to be compliant to a point.
I'd like to touch on sport as a metaphor for life and some of the lessons it teaches you. And I think we'll all acknowledge it goes from extremes, highs to lows, humorous episodes, and really some quite dark times as well, very much like life. Let's just lighten it up a little bit. Can you each give perhaps an example of some of the humorous things that have happened on the sports field, either at school or at other levels that you've coached? Katleho, anything come to mind?
Yeah, it does. Actually, back in my school days, I was playing first team rugby, and one of my friends' dad was probably one of our biggest supporters, and he was one of the guys that was just roaming up and down the field. And for some reason, the ref obviously just got so tired of listening to his voice because he's abusing him and he's telling him this and this, and he actually sent him off. But what happened was that he was wearing a jacket. So he walked off, took down his jacket, went to sit in the stands for probably about 2 or 3 minutes, and then he went to the other side of the field and carried on doing the same thing. But yeah, for us, it was just funny to see him obviously just change his clothing to try and get close to the action.
Ross, anything you can recall that brings a smile to your face every time?
Yeah, we have quite strict rules at St. John's when it comes to playing squash. So in South Africa, if you're a junior, you have to wear eyewear, just for safety reasons. And I had these two boys that kept coming down and playing, and when I'd be there, they'd be wearing their eyewear. But the second I would turn my back and go and coach or train someone else, I'd come back and they wouldn't have their glasses on. I kept pointing. I said, boys, you need to be careful. Someone's going to get hurt. And they're like, no, only inexperienced players. Sure as Bob, one of the boys accidentally framed the ball and it flew. And I think it whacked the boy on the neck. And one of the moms that was watching the situation came running. She was like, oh my word, someone just got hit. So I went to go and look, and this boy had like a big red mark on his neck. But to this day, I've never seen him without glasses again. So it was just hilarious at how he learned his own lesson. You know?
Good life lesson.
Yeah.
Garrett, lots of funny men and women on the hockey turf. What are some of the recollections you have?
Yeah, I was thinking about one exactly a year ago. We were actually in India with the national team, and there's a lot of practical joking that goes on when you're stuck in a hotel room in India for 24 hours a day. So one of the guys phoned the room next door to the youngest player in the team and said, look, you've got a media interview. He phoned and with a put on an accent. You've got a media interview in 15 minutes. You better get downstairs in your blazer and tie. We're coming to pick you up. So this young 20-year-old, as he was at the time, kitted up in his number ones, ran downstairs, sat in the lobby and sat in the lobby and sat in the lobby and wondered where everybody was. Eventually phoned the manager, and the manager knew nothing. And he looked around, and there was the whole team waiting to see how long he was going to sit there before he gave up. So, yeah, things like that. You kind of remember those often more than the hockey itself.
When it gets tough, your boys and girls in some situations have to pull themselves through. As a coach, how do you balance exposing them to those difficult scenarios in training, in particular, pushing them to a limit, so that it builds up that resilience that will serve them well on the field, with actually your sort of nurturing approach? Any ideas on that, Katleho?
Yeah, so for me, I like to put players in situations that mimic what's going to happen on Saturday, and if you get that right, and if you can train that, it's always easier for players to adapt, to those situations. So you have to perform somewhere before you've been there, and obviously that comes in with how you prepare and what you do throughout that week and when it's time to perform and it's time to do the business, it's not that much of a shock for you. But you also have to be a brave coach to do that, because you also want to try and focus on certain aspects, of the game. But I think for me, I believe that the game is chaos, and sometimes we have to create chaos on the field, so that boys can prepare for when it matters and when it's competition time.
Gareth, those situations on the hockey field, I mean, perhaps obviously not as physical as rugby, but nevertheless, the game is played at an incredible pace in the modern era. How do you push your players to be able to adapt to that?
So just to expand a bit on that, John, I think we must always remember that this isn't a high-performance environment. So we actually want kids to fail. We want them to lose the odd game. We want things to be hard. We want them to work it out for themselves. So part of my training is always going to have an element of kind of failing or not succeeding, shall we say, straight away. And I think that's quite important. And creating sessions where they have to make multiple decisions in more than one phase of play, so that they understand the 360-degree nature of the game, and then they're willing to make decisions. They're not waiting for the guy on the side with the PlayStation controller to tell them where to go. So for me, that's something that I aim for. I don't always get it right, but I really try and emphasize that. So quite a lot of gameplay, but a little bit of repetition and unstructured. Always have an unstructured session, part of a drill, so that the boys have to then think for themselves.
I think that's very refreshing to hear that you actually encourage failure at times, because I think sometimes we're a little bit overprotective in this era, but that's certainly a great strategy. Ross, how does it differ in an individual sport like squash? How do you push them to the brink so that they're going to be able to deal with that in those tough championship matches?
That is a very good question, because it's incredibly difficult to do. But I think a large part of it is the relationship that you have with the player. So being able to talk them through everything. So you've got a good relationship. So when the going gets tough, you have that to fall back on. And then when we train to put them under like intense physical things, so time-based sprint challenges, whatever it might be, we do that a lot, because you want to push them past the point that they're going to reach in any match, so that they learn to become comfortable being uncomfortable. When a match comes, they're not fazed by, oh, I'm tired, I'm burnt. Like that must be a thought that goes through their mind. They must become accustomed with that, I think it's also really important to get them to be playing, like Garrett said, competition where we know they're going to lose. Because I think that the failing is a lesson that will carry them through their entire life, but they've got to learn how to get over themselves in that way without sounding funny. But it is a very important lesson that they need. We need to be there to affirm them and uplift them and encourage them, but it still needs to happen, and they still have to learn how to deal with it.
I think we've lost John there. Shall we answer one of these questions on the chat while we wait for him to come back?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do that.
What about overtraining and exhaustion for children? Playing for a club and at school, 2 practices a week, 2 school practices a week, and then 2-3 matches on a weekend. That's from Cassie Lister. How do you feel about that, Katleho? I think in your sport, a lot of gym and a lot of extra work, it can be quite demanding.
Yeah, it can be very demanding. I think as well for myself, again, it's just a matter of managing yourself and managing what you need to do and when you need to do it. And you also, if you also have to decide for yourself if you really want to pursue a career in your sport. Obviously, then you'd want to play extra games, extra club sessions, or whatever. If you don't, obviously, then you won't do it. So you also, as an individual, you have to, be honest with yourself. I have to do my school sport. All right, it's part of school regulations. Do I love this game so much that I want to invest more time of it outside of school? And once you've answered yourself, as honestly as possible, there, I think you can find a lot of ways to try and manage that situation.
Can I add to that as well? I do think that we're dealing with players here who need or who have external governance. So you've got parents that are looking after them, And so I think like nutrition, like what they're eating is extremely, extremely important in the performance of your child. What's going in is going to absolutely affect the way that they perform. And then also the governance, that's who is creating your programs. Is it being watched? Is it being monitored correctly? If so, then burnout and things like that, it's not something that you're going to come across too often.
It's something I'm actually really, really aware of, and I think quite afraid of. I think the load on your average teenager is just every year just getting more and more and more. And I think with the academic and the cultural and the sporting, it's, at some point you've got to be willing to say to a child, okay, we're not going to practice today because you look like you need a rest. Because this age they should be sleeping kind of 9 to 10 hours every night, and I'm not sure that's being achieved, especially with devices and the extra work and whatever, and it's through nobody's fault. So it's a worry, and I think parents need to say no sometimes. Parents need to say, okay, you're missing your club practice tonight. If the club team is going to drop you on the weekend, that's their loss, not yours.
Yeah, 100%.
I think if I can comment a little bit on there physiologically as well, it's very difficult as a coach to sometimes monitor those loads because you're only exposed to one window, of that kid's life. And the child, the parents are driving a process where they're going to club, to academies, to province, etc. Who should be in charge of managing that process there? I mean, can you put a 16-year-old in charge of that? Do you put a parent in charge of that? Who can actually manage the whole picture?
The adults have got to help the child. At the end of the day, that's why we're called adults. But we all have our own demands and needs. I think it's got to be a conversation. It's got to be an ongoing conversation. The high achievers are often the ones that end up putting themselves under the most pressure. I think your average B or C team player who plays purely for the pleasure of it and not necessarily for the great achievement of it, he gets the balance right because he's not investing his mind in it as much as his body. And I think we've got to be careful of the small percentage of boys who really, really push themselves past their limits.
Okay.
And also to add on there to what Garreth is saying, I also think obviously, you can't say to a 16-year-old, how are you feeling, or do you think that you need a rest? Because 9 times out of 10, they do want to play all the time and they want to be on the field and they want to experience. But I think obviously from a coach's perspective and from adults or parents' perspective, that we need to take control of that situation. Much more tighter.
Okay. We're getting into the last 10 minutes, 8 or 10 minutes or so, and I just really want to try and pull a few things together, give people some hope for the resumption of the sports season, and to tell them that there is a strategy moving forward. In terms of where we're going this year, can you perhaps each give a little bit of insight into where you're looking in terms of school sport, winter sports? Is there still a prospect of playing at all? And, will they be kept busy over the coming weeks with a view to perhaps playing? And then finally, is there a chance of playing some of those winter sports a bit later in the year, perhaps into August, September, whereas, they might infringe a little bit on the summer sports? Any strategies that have been discussed in the school environment?
There have been a few ideas thrown around, and from my conversations with Alan, there's definitely a commitment from sports leadership in all the schools to try and kind of create some kind of a season. What that looks like yet, we don't know. Ultimately, we're in the hands of the lawmakers. But there is a commitment to playing some kind of rugby, hockey, squash, and also just good old-fashioned exercise, making sure that within the restrictions of the law, boys are exercising and boys are staying healthy while they're on campus. So we're very committed to it. What it looks like, nobody knows. Nobody knows what next week's going to look like. So, but the commitment is there, that's for sure.
Yeah. And certainly, I think your point is well made. And just from a medical point of view, to emphasize the importance of keeping fit as a means to keeping healthy. And I think, once you get into a lifestyle where exercise is not a routine, then your risks of contracting viruses such as SARS-CoV-2 and the risks of suffering more of a severe form of COVID-19 are that much more greater. So I think it's very, very important to keep emphasizing that, and to just commend you guys for keeping the exercise going. I think some of the innovations have been fantastic, whether they've been online or encouraging people to, cross-train and do other forms of exercise. I think that's very, very important, together with some of the other things that have been mentioned here, like eating correctly and sleeping properly. Any final comments from each of you in terms of where you view your sports going in the coming years? Ross, let's start with you. Where is squash heading? What is the support you're getting from the National Federation? What are the structures like? What does an aspiring young South African squash player look forward to?
So I think that squash has come a long way. Firstly, our numbers have grown intensely when we're looking at interprovincial tournaments and things like that. I'd say the two most exciting aspects that if I were a schoolboy now, what I personally would be looking at and going, wow, that's what I would like to do, is there's an interprovincial tour that takes place in the June-July period, where there's a lot of players that go. Every province in the country goes. Most times they're sending between like 3 and 6 teams, guys and girls, of course. And shortly after that, they announce the top 10 players for South Africa, and they normally do 2 international tours, one where they invite the top 10, and then one where they only invite the top 3 of each gender, so guys and girls. Those tours are absolutely mind-blowing, and they're amazing to go on. And that is what I was talking about earlier, that sets you up. And I think that those tours, we've had so many new countries join, we've had a lot of extra teams and things like that, and the publicity for the sport has grown. It's now televised. We've got a lot more media coverage over the sport. Just new satellite cameras and things just make it so much more awesome to watch. And I really do think that we are this much closer to getting into the Olympic Games. If that happens, I think our sport will see it 8 times over. It's going to blossom.
That's a very optimistic outlook. It certainly looks as if the structures have expanded considerably. Garreth, hockey, often regarded as the poorer cousin to rugby at schools, has now assumed a status where I think it's elevated itself to something that a lot of boys and girls aspire to doing well in. At a national level, we've seen both our ladies and men's teams really on the brink of breaking through into that top echelon. What does a young 17, 18-year-old look forward to in terms of South African hockey?
I think he or she has a lot to look forward to. It's a game you can play till you're 85 years old, and that's what we'll probably always have over rugby, to be honest, as a family sport. But I think can be optimistic about where the game's going in terms of the quality of hockey that the national teams are starting to produce. I think that the level of participation nationwide is increasing, and the level of investment in surfaces is amazing. I don't know how they're going to keep going with water, but I think sand turfs will continue to be laid down, and I think it's going to be something that's only going to increase the standard. And you see a growing professionalism in the co-ed schools with full-time coaches, and I think the coaching base is growing. So the hockey is only going to get better. So as a youngster, there's so many reasons to keep playing the game, and whether it's at university or club, and the network and the people who play the game, so many people to meet and interact with and grow. And from a diversity point of view, we are growing as a sport massively. So yeah, I'm quite optimistic. The big thing for us is to overcome our huge financial challenges. I know we all bang on about it when we're in the hockey world, but it really is something that holds us back.
Yeah. Katleho, I don't think you need to encourage young men to play rugby, to pick up a ball, to throw it around, to tackle, to condition. I'm going to direct your answer to the parents out there and say, why is rugby a good choice for a young man in those 5 years of high school to develop as an individual?
Yeah, I think obviously, like again, as I said earlier, I think just the relationship that you can get to build with your team, with your teammates, the opportunity to get to grow by playing different positions. So guys can always move to positions in terms of if you're a forward and based on your ability, and likewise also for the backs. Also to get to know and experience what other coaches do and how different they coach. and what they can learn from each and every different coach to try and make them much better players. And I think also, I think every schoolboy in the country loves and actually prepares for Easter Festival. That's what top under 17s and 18s look forward to. They just want to be there and be seen on TV and win games and be shown in the newspapers. Look at the Blues team that beat so and so and so and so. I think for me that's probably the pinnacle of why a boy should be aiming to play and invest in himself in terms of playing rugby for his high school or college career.
Great answers to end a very lively discussion. Lots of compliments coming through on the chat here. Thanking you for your participation. To Ross, to Garreth, to Katleho, thank you very much for making yourselves available. More importantly, thanks for what you're doing for the young men and women out there, for motivating them, keeping them fit and healthy. We will see winter sport again in our school environments, and we know they'll be well conditioned for it. We know that our schools are better for the sports that we lay on for them and the lessons that come from them. So from me, thank you very much for your participation, and thank you for what you do for sport. Good evening.
Thanks so much, John.
Thanks very much. Thanks.